The common pigeon. A misunderstood, quiet, and in fact very intelligent bird that most of us come across on a daily basis. It's also the one bird out of thousands of options that I decided to draw 100 times. And if you're wondering how and why, then stick around and I'll explain everything, because this was quite the journey. Each of the drawings were done using a reference, and I decided that for the first 10 I would focus on the 3D forms and not bother with any feathers or textures of any kind. My thought process was that it might help me get acquainted with how a pigeon is structured, and it would also be a nice ease into the challenge. In this phase, I ended up taking a couple different approaches, simplifying the forms to varying degrees. Some turned out better than others, but all in all, I thought the results were pretty decent. After that, it was time to start doing some complete drawings. And I think now is the best time to say that, much like some people misjudge pigeons, I really misjudged the difficulty of this challenge. One reason why I decided to draw pigeons was because I thought they were a relatively easy subject. I mean, the contours look pretty smooth and you can quite easily identify the major elements in its anatomy. However, when I took a closer look at the texture, the alignment, and the placement of the feathers, it became a real challenge to represent all those elements on the page without making the drawing look messy and confusing. Too few lines and the drawing would look flat. Too many and it would look like an explosion of scribbles. But no matter how unhappy I ended up being with a drawing, I carried on. And wherever I could, I would go back and fill up empty nooks on the page with elements of a drawing that I wanted to give another try. It was still early on in the challenge, and I was hopeful and optimistic that by the end, I would be a pigeon drawing master. Now, while looking at all these close-up images of pigeons, I noticed this lump they have on the top end of their beak. And I found it quite interesting because, like many beginners, I always imagined a bird's beak to have this simple, pointy cone shape. But after doing a bit of research, I discovered that this area is called a sear. And there was so much to it, in fact, that I thought it deserved a separate page of drawings entirely, just to try and understand it better. Now, apparently, many types of birds have a sear, but depending on the species, it can vary in size, color, and even texture. What's more interesting is that scientists don't really know what its function is. I've seen theories that it might play a role in a bird's respiration or sense of smell because the nostrils open through the sear, but how exactly, we still don't know. In addition to that, there are cases where you can distinguish males from females based on how the sear looks. Usually it's larger in size and darker in color in males compared to females, and sometimes the sear can be an indicator of a bird's health. But still, it seems like there's a lot left to be discovered when it comes to this mysterious anatomical element. Now, going back to the main challenge, I was about halfway done when I decided to spice things up a bit by doing 10 gestural drawings of pigeons. And I'm going to be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with gesture drawings, so I just tried to quickly capture the pose, no texture, no details. And as one might expect, the results were lacking in many areas. But at this point, I had bigger problems than that. You see, I already had 60 drawings done, and the odd thing was that I didn't really feel like I learned much. By now I expected to be a lot more confident in my pigeon drawing skills, and I just wasn't. Later on in the challenge I realized why, but there are a couple more things I want to show you before we get to that part. Around drawing number 70, I decided to do another separate page where I would take a closer look at why pigeons puff up their chests. At first, I thought they looked a bit silly, but also kind of interesting, which made me really curious to know more about this behavior. And after another round of bird-related online searches, it was revealed that the primary reason for the chest puffing is mating. Male pigeons puff up trying to impress females. It might also be a survival strategy, When puffing up, the pigeon tries to appear larger in the face of predators. Sometimes they do it when they clean themselves or when they are sick. I couldn't find out what the benefits of puffing up when they are sick might be, but it does seem to be the case. After this little side quest, it was back to the main challenge, and this is when I had a major realization. While working my way through the last 30 drawings, sometimes I would get into this autopilot mode. I would draw without paying much attention to what I was looking at. I would do the same type of strokes and make the same mistakes over and over without exploring any possible solutions, without actively trying to get better. And looking back, I think that was my biggest mistake. I kept jumping around from form studies to gesture drawings, then texture, then feathers, and it became this confusing mix of trying to do a bit of everything and not really focusing enough on anything specific. To make matters worse, while I was nearing the end of the challenge, I got to the point where it wasn't about trying to understand my subject anymore, it was just about getting the 100 drawings done. Which I did! After many days, I finished the challenge with this pigeon couple. I thought the image looked really nice, and it was also quite fitting since, fun fact, most pigeons do mate for life. But I wasn't quite done yet, because after 100 drawings of pigeons, plus some extra in between, it was time to put everything together on a final summary page. This time I did a lay-in with a colored pencil first, because I had to figure out the placement of each element beforehand. I wanted all the information to fit on one page, and I think it turned out quite nice. I ended up including some additional facts like the scientific name of the common pigeon, as well as some notes about the structure of its legs and wings, and making this summary page was honestly the most fun I had in the entire challenge. All in all, I still think the drawings were worth the effort. It was tough, but also rewarding. I definitely should have been more focused throughout the challenge on the actual purpose of the exercise, but most importantly, I think this challenge reinforced one of the main reasons why I wanted to make a video out of this experience. And that was to hopefully show that even the most common of animals, like a pigeon, can be so interesting and fascinating if we just take some time to look at them with a bit of curiosity. I hope you enjoyed the journey and were able to learn something from my mistakes. I found this to be a very illuminating challenge, and it's definitely not going to be the last one. But that's it for today. Take care. Bye.